When hope, the eagle that towered, could see no cliff beyond him in the sky, his pinions were bent droopingly, and homeward turned his softened eye. Greetings, Poe fans. I am Carmen Bolden.
And I am Jeanie Smith, and we are the Potastic 2.
And we are back for the month of May. It is the next to last day of May, and a day after a very special holiday. We had some things come up to where we had to wait until the day after Memorial Day, and that is what we're going to focus on today.
We are going to talk a little bit of a history of Poe and his military service.
Yes.
And we're going to talk a lot about how that military service is the reason for yesterday's holiday.
Yes, absolutely. Because you got to go back to the origin.
Exactly, because that's what we're all about. We're about Poe and the origins.
Yes, but not origins of the species at this moment.
No, we're not going to talk about Darwin.
No. So, Jeanie, just...
I
know, but you know. All right. So, Poe's military career. May 26th, 1827, he enlisted as Edgar A. Perry in the Army. And he was 18. And how old was he? How old did he say he was?
22. He lied and said he was 22 years old.
Yes, he did. And I found a quote. It said, "A gentleman could not serve as an enlisted man, and that's why he lied." Because he was a gentleman, but he was trying to get away from things.
Yes, because according to the readings, he had been pretty much on his own for like 2 months, no support, nothing.
Right.
And he was broke, he was hungry, he needed something. So he was currently in Boston at the time.
Yes.
When he went and sought out the recruiter, I guess is what you would... I don't know if they had recruiters back then. I think there wasn't.
That'd be interesting to look that up.
Yeah, it wasn't like what we see now, the recruiting offices, but they would be something along the line of the military headquarters type of thing. Yes. So he sought them out, and that's when he said, "Please sign me up," and he lied about his age, and then he was agreeing on not only he lied about his age, but he lied about his name.
Absolutely.
So he actually forged 2 felonies at the same time.
Yes.
So
the fall of 1827, he was actually in Boston and stationed at Fort Independence on Castle Island. I've actually been there, and it's really cool to walk around. It almost feels like a little island, but it's not.
Yeah, and that's one thing I love about when I visit Boston in that area, because there is such a rich history everywhere you go. Because it was one of the main hubs of the early years of America.
Yes, and that particular fort dates back to, I think I've written down 1634.
Sounds about right, because that was about 15 years after the first settlement of the Pilgrims.
Yes.
Because it was 1609 when they accidentally landed there. Because that wasn't where they were going.
Or was it, hold on, was it 1620? We just, Jeff and I just went there yesterday.
Well, 1620 was when Plymouth Rock.
That's what I'm thinking of.
But the Pilgrims and everything, they got their charter.
That's right.
And everything was supposed to be for Virginia.
I forgot
Virginia
about
company.
The Pilgrims.
Yes, the Pilgrims.
Yes.
You're thinking of the Puritans and all the rest of them.
Yes.
So, yeah, no.
Let's not mix up the peas here.
Yeah,
we got a lot of them.
Pilgrims are first. So, yes, it's very much a land of different historical values. So, yes, Fort Independence would be the area. It was one of the major battle sites, if I'm not mistaken, during the Revolutionary War.
I think so. And John Adams was the one who actually gave the actual name to the fort as Fort Independence.
That sounds about right, because John Adams was very much a cousin to old Samuel Adams, and they were always on the opposite side. You talk about 2 different people and the way they got things done. Sam Adams was all about, in your face, let's blow crap up, let's shoot people, it's all good. And then John Adams is like, no, we're going to write a very stern letter.
Yes.
Because he was a lawyer.
Well, and one thing I wanted to add that I remember researching actually back way before the podcast began, when I first went to Boston. It was actually my second time, my husband's first time, and when we were planning on going to Fort Independence. And so I resurrected that research for our podcast today. And while he was there, he heard a legend that happened supposedly happened at Fort Independence, where these two men, Robert F. Massey and Gustavus Drain, in 1817 had a duel. They were two lieutenants, and apparently they argued over a card game. Drain was basically not very popular, but Massey was very popular. And so everybody was pulling for Massey and all that. And that all went down. And then because of Massey's popularity, his friends supposedly took Drain, got him drunk, and sealed him in a vault in the fort.
Irony.
Yes. Oh, yes. And basically, the legend was not true because Massey didn't die until 1846.
Nice.
So, but anyway, that was probably a neat, tale before bedtime or whatever, that got told. Well, it's in 1846, Poe published The Cask of Amontillado in Godey's Lady's book. So everyone thinks that, it's very possible he got the idea for that story from this legend.
Makes sense.
Now, what's interesting, in 1905, though, they renovated the fort and they found a skeleton wearing what was left of a military uniform chained to the wall of an abandoned casement inside the fort.
No, wow.
So I wonder if that's really true or not.
Well, the skeleton kind of makes a little proof there in some aspects. Somebody got walled up.
Right.
Whether it be Gustav or whatever it is.
Gustavus.
Yeah, Gustavus.
Yes.
Could have been Yo Drain. He could they probably put him in
the unpopular one. Yes.
Yeah. So, wait a minute. Wasn't Drain Gustavus? Wasn't that his last name?
Yes. Yeah, Robert F.
No, it was the other one, the popular one.
Right.
Maybe he got his comeuppance and got locked in there.
That's what you kind of wonder.
Well, and also in that aspect, you have to understand that the military also were very cut bait kind of thing when it come to getting things. So if you disobeyed, you broke anything, they were very much on, this is military court. Thump, thump.
Yeah.
Could have been that somebody was locked in there because they had done something wrong. You never know.
Oh, yeah. And it kind of, you kind of think about hazing, early forms of hazing and things like that. And I think of the movie A Few Good Men.
Exactly.
When, Code Red.
Yep, Code Red. You can't handle, sorry.
Yeah, it's Code Cask.
Yeah, Code Cask, called the Cask of Amontillado.
Exactly.
But one of the good things about Edgar A. Perry, he actually reached Sergeant Major status and was put in charge of ordnance and explosives, which I thought was cool.
I thought that was too. I mean, which just kind of, adds into his skills, all the skills he has.
Yeah. And it actually kind of leads into something where, he was, he lied about his age getting in, lied about his name.
Right.
But then all of a sudden he had reached that pinnacle for basically an enlisted man. Mm-hmm. And he left because he just didn't like it anymore. Right. But I was going to say, but before he left in fall of 1827,
November of 1827, they sent him to Fort Moultrie. So that's when he served his time in South Carolina, Sullivan's Island. And then, and then he was transferred around 13 months later to Fortress Monroe at the entrance to the Chesapeake Bay. And I think, isn't there an interesting story about that, Jeannie?
Chesapeake Bay?
When he was there.
Well, let's see.
Something to do with one of the books that he published.
Oh.
Poems.
Tamerlane?
not Tamerlane. This was his third one. That he did. That was West Point. I'm getting.
That's West Point. You're
just like earlier. Yeah. Yes. So
you're jumping the gun there.
Yes, I am.
No, while he was
pun intended.
Yeah, true. He was explosive. So yeah, jumping the gun. No, while he was doing his military time as Edgar A. Perry, he used that $5 a day that he was receiving from the military to publish his works of Tamerlane and other poems.
Yes. I do. I like to jump the gun. Yes,
which I thought was very ironic because when Carmen was choosing the quote for the beginning of today's podcast, it's from Tamerlane.
Yes, it is.
And I thought, oh, irony, right there we go. He was in the military, and Tamerlane starts this, story.
Yes.
So yes, in Chesapeake Bay. Well, the one thing that popped in my head that you were asking me, I was like, wait a minute. Are we talking about War of 1812? Because that's where Star Spangled Banner was written.
Right.
The boat outside Fort McHenry in Baltimore.
Exactly.
So this was before Poe's time, but Poe, he spent a lot of time in Baltimore, in that area in Chesapeake Bay. So
yeah, and so he kind of going back to what Jeanie started talking about. He decided to quit the Army, and so one of the things which I thought this was interesting because I don't think this would happen in today's time was that he had to find an enlisted man that would take and finish his time. And so he found Sergeant Samuel Graves, who agreed to do that for him to where he could leave the Army.
Yeah, and this was the early times because it was still known as the Continental Army at this time. It wasn't the military that we think of today.
Yeah.
That, it's pretty much an act of Congress, no pun intended. But the truth.
Yes, you did.
Yes, I did it. But the truth for you to get out, if you get in.
Yes.
So, and you don't want that to happen. Dishonorable discharges are not good for your record when you get out.
Right. And so, Poe was very successful while he was in the Army. But then, when he decided to quit it, where did he want to go?
West Point.
Yes.
That was just the weirdest thing ever. Because I'm thinking, dude, what? You were in the military, but now you want to go to a military school.
Right.
And he reminds me so much when I was reading his records and everything about being in West Point, about how bad he was as a student. Wasn't that he wasn't academically inclined, but he was just horrible as a West Point cadet.
Right.
Because one of the things that got him kicked out was his absences.
Right, exactly. And he really excelled, though, in like all the classical studies, especially French. We know he was pretty much fluent in French. But yes, he did not like all the regimented disciplinary type.
Yeah, and which that's kind of irony in itself also, because it's, well, if you think about it, someone who is as talented, I guess, as Edgar Allan Poe with his, with his art type of thing, with poetry and all this
abstract thinking.
Yeah, abstract thinking. That type of logistics and structure would not be very good on his list, which that's why it was surprising to me that he actually went to the military. However, I said, he was broke, he needed the money, and it was some way that he could get money quickly.
Exactly. And how many people have done that throughout, history?
Yeah, because that's kind of one of the ways that they could get there.
Absolutely. And and so he didn't like the marching, he didn't like the food, and probably being told you got to be here, there, and yonder for all these.
Killed him.
Yeah,
I know, it was not fun for me.
Yeah, and so, but he entered West Point around March of 1830.
Yes, which was only, a year and a half after he left?
Yeah, there was some months between the time that he left the Army to where he could start West Point.
Yes, because he enrolled in May of 1827, and then I think it was June or July of 1828.
I believe so, yeah.
When he left after he got Sergeant, what's his name, to cover for him.
Yeah, Samuel Graves.
So then it was 1830 in January, was it? Didn't he enlist in January?
It was March. March. Or he may have like applied, but then he started in March. Yeah.
Yes,
and actually, John Allen, his foster father, intervened for him to be able to get in.
Yeah, because with West Point, like you said, when he lied about his age to get in the military because a gentleman kind of thing. West Point was very much, and it in some ways it still is, centered around who you know.
Right.
Because back then, all the major, still no pun intended, all the major military men that ruled the Continental armies,
right,
came from West Point.
Exactly.
Because two of the main ones, Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant, were both West Point graduates.
Right.
Because they were there at the same time. And the irony is Ulysses S. Grant had kind of the same problems that Edgar did when he was at West Point.
Yeah.
Only he was a little bit more on the alcoholic side.
Yeah.
He was true alcoholic.
Well, that's true, and continued that on.
Yeah, and that's why he kept losing so many of his placements.
Right.
But
exactly.
So Poe he stayed in there. He kept getting demerits after demerits after demerits, and it was the demerits that got him kicked out.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that he did was he wanted to publish his third volume, which was called Poems.
Yes.
And he basically had the cadets that he was in school with, or at the academy with, give him subscription money, and he earned $170 from those subscriptions to publish this third book of poetry.
Yep.
Well, one thing that, a lot of people I think don't realize is how funny Poe was and how satirical, sarcastic that he could be. And so one of the things that they loved about him was all of these anecdotes and stories he would tell, poems he would write that were funny.
Yes.
Sarcastic and all of the, that.
He had the cadets snowed.
Yes. And so when he put together this work of poetry, it had nothing to do with what he did in just rambling off of his brain.
Right. None of the stories, none of the poems, nothing that they had heard while he was at West Point even matched what they had paid a subscription for.
Yeah, so they felt duped, and so they basically took the copies that were given to them by Poe and flung them into the Hudson River.
Yep. So 50 copies that were given out to the cadets that had paid the subscription became waterlogged.
Yeah. You kind of wonder if there's anything that's still left in the Hudson River.
Oh, no. Yeah. I mean, no, probably all the fishes probably didn't like it either, and they ate it.
I'm sure they disintegrated.
Erosion got those.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because back then, they weren't treated as well chemically wise as we have nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
Something thrown in there now would probably be there for another 20,000 years.
Probably so. All the preservatives. But a lot of the problems that he had while he was at West Point, part of it was his own demons, but part of it was just the problems that he had with his foster father. It just everything stemmed kind of back to their relationship or non-relationship, and that, I think, it's like he probably was very happy and appreciative, I should say, that John Allen got him into West Point, but John Allen really didn't do much after that to kind of help him beyond that.
And also you have to think about it, which is the irony of it all too.
Yeah.
Is because what pushed Edgar into getting into the military in the first part was because he got cut off. He had no money. He had no money, so that he went into the military to make money.
Right.
So then he finally left because he didn't like it. So he thought with John Allen getting back on his good graces and him helping him get into West Point, this would be another way that he could show him that, hey, look, I am a gentleman. I can proceed. But John Allen did the very bare minimum. And then Edgar could see when he was in there that this isn't making a difference to
Exactly.
me. Yeah. And he kind of probably gave up after that and said, screw it.
Yeah.
I'm done.
That's exactly what he did. And so in January of 1831, he quit his classes and was court-martialed formally and dismissed from the academy March 6th, 1831.
Right.
That was the official date and everything.
Yeah, because it was that January that I saw in the National Archive
Yes.
records.
Yes.
Where he had missed like 30-some days, starting at the beginning of January all the way through February.
Yeah. And so, because of, his time in the military and at West Point, we do get lots of poetry that he did write in there, and he, without joining the military, you kind of wonder, would Cask of Amontillado, if that really is true, we have no definite proof, would that story have ever come about?
Yeah, we have the coincidences.
Yes.
Plus, we also know from our own experiences in our own lives that I know many writing teachers that I've had over the years always say the best thing about your writing is write what you know.
Yes.
And, sure, you can add in your own imagination, your own interest, sci-fi, fantasy, all that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
But there's always that underlying level of some little sliver of truth.
Yeah.
Some little experience that we've had that has spurned that.
Oh, yeah, because anytime I'm writing, I pull from memories and little snippets that come to my brain of, oh, that's like this. There's all those, relationships of, connecting in my brain and, and that kind of thing.
And emotions.
Yes.
I mean, emotions are
how did you feel when you were doing this?
Yeah. It spurned you into writing something. If you write something that is full of darkness and horror and all that kind of stuff, you probably were going through some kind of tragedy, some type of grief that you had to get out, and so you had to put it on paper.
Exactly. And Poe did all of that.
Yeah. And so, Poe is the equivalent of the experienced man. And hey, we like to think that little story of the duel, which could be a true occurrence because duels were very popular in those days.
Absolutely. And I mean, that makes a whole lot of sense. I mean,
and it'd be kind of cool if they used DNA analysis on that skeleton that they
found
at Fort Independence and figure out who is the dead guy.
Who is this? Yeah.
Yeah. That would be cool. So, I mean, even though military probably wasn't where he was going, he was pushed that direction because he needed something in his life at that time.
Yes, absolutely, to make him feel like there was more of a purpose than being, the foster son of John Allen,
Exactly.
and trying to prove himself, on and on and on again
and
to
survive.
Him. Yes.
Survival is all about.
Okay, don't bring Darwin in again.
I'm not. I'm just saying it's survival. He needed to survive.
It sounded like that's where you were going. Survival of the fittest.
No, because I hate to say it, Poe would not be someone I would picture going into the military at any time.
No. Oh, no. I agree.
So survival was definitely something that,
yes,
you got to eat, you got to have food, you got to have money. So you do what's necessary
to make
sure.
You do what you got to do.
And that's what I got from Poe.
I agree. And, kind of thinking about this, we appreciate Poe being in the military and memorializing that.
Exactly.
So we're going to lead into talking about the part of this episode is about, origin stories and things like that, not origin of the species, and going into Memorial Day, because we do appreciate Poe's time in the military that he spent, and also all of the other soldiers that have served and died and, came back from war. And because
and the ones that didn't.
Right. We would not be the country we are if not for them.
Yeah, and it's just like what we were talking about with Poe. It wasn't a true military like we see today.
Right.
It was still called the Continental Army. It was still very much in its infancy.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until about, 20 years after he got out of West Point, whether voluntarily or involuntarily.
Right.
When the country got into the most devastating part of our history.
Exactly.
And Civil War broke out.
Yes.
And it was during the Civil War where a lot of things come to pass in history, especially dealing with the military. The first Congressional Medal of Honor was given out during the Civil War, and most people don't realize that it was given to a woman.
Interesting.
Yes, it was given to a woman. However, Congress, in their ultimate wisdom in the early 1900s, took it back.
Shame.
Yes, but they did eventually give it back to her later down the years. But the first Congressional Medal was given during the Civil War. But November 19th, 1863 is in my mind the first dedication for the soldiers that was ever taken, into account in history.
Right.
And it was given in Gettysburg Address for the Day of Gettysburg by President Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
It was a day that he stood in Gettysburg Cemetery on that hallowed ground where he first recognized the sacrifice for both the Union and the Confederates that had died for fighting what they believed.
Right.
They were fighting for what they believed in, which is the true essence of America.
Yes.
We stand up for things and we believe in things and we have these freedoms that most, 99% of the rest of the world don't have.
Right. And some are to the point of not having any ounce of any type of freedom of speech, especially.
Yes. And, and it has its blowbacks that we have to deal with.
It does, yes.
However, but that to me was the first dedication.
Yes.
Then in 1868 was the official first dedication that they made at Arlington Cemetery, where they laid flowers, they put flags, and Arlington Cemetery was actually put on the ground of Robert E. Lee. That used to be his homestead. And one of the surrenders during the Civil War is he had to give up everything. He had to give up his home, his money, his everything, land. And they used his land and created Arlington Cemetery as a memorial.
For the trade-off, I mean, I can only imagine what he went through, but to still have that today and celebrated. And I know, like, just from the research I did, 5,000 people helped decorate 20,000 graves that day, May 30th, 1868.
Yeah, it was a, it was a sad time in our history, but it was kind of one of those things that you have to remember.
Yeah.
You have to remember what was, what had happened and who had sacrificed and why they had sacrificed.
Absolutely.
And then it wasn't, and they officially called it Decoration Day.
Yes. That was the first title of Memorial Day, really.
Right. And then it was in 1873 in New York that New York was the first actual state that made it an official holiday. Yes.
And basically, it was, they didn't necessarily call it anything official, but it was leaning towards more Memorial Day at this point.
Yeah, it was a dedication day.
Yeah.
But they didn't officially name it anything.
Right.
That didn't come about until, and this is what Carmen and I were talking about earlier. I said, I can remember the dates because 1873 is exactly 100 years before I was born.
Right.
They had the first state to announce it. But then 1971...
my birth year.
Yes, was when Congress made it an official holiday as the last Monday of the month of May.
Right. And
Memorial Day.
Yeah, they basically passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act. And that's where we really get Memorial Day from.
Right.
The official title and everything.
And it is actually a difference then to Veterans Day. Those are two different things.
Absolutely.
Veterans is to pretty much celebrate all those that had served in the military, whether still alive or dead.
Right.
Memorial Day is just dedicated to those that have made the ultimate sacrifice.
Exactly. And what's really neat, still at Arlington National Cemetery, every single year on this date, they put small flags on every single grave of the military people who died, and either the president or the vice president lays the wreath on the tomb of the unknown soldier.
Yes, and gives a speech.
Yeah, and if you've never gone to see they do the ceremony of the tomb of the unknown soldier on other days besides Memorial Day.
Right.
If you haven't gone to see that, that's something you need to do and visit in Washington, D.C. or in Arlington, because it really makes you think about a lot of things.
Yeah, and that's just like in D.C., all the different memorials that they have dedicated to the different types of wars.
Yes.
All that. The Korean Memorial is the latest one. That was the last one I got to go see when I was in D.C.
I got to see it too.
And the best time to see it is at night.
Yes.
Because the sheer design of it will give you chills.
It does. It's brilliantly designed.
Exactly. It most definitely is. And the thing about it is Memorial Day, we always are just thinking about those that are gone, but most people don't realize that there is an agency that was put in place. It's called POWMIA. That was put in place dedicated to recovery of soldiers, no matter whether it was World War I, World War II, Korea, and even some of them are still working on Civil War mass graves.
Yes, that's
however,
true.
those are more difficult because there was no official records for who was doing what, where, and when.
Right.
And it wasn't until a couple of years after the war started that they actually had differing uniforms.
Yes.
You know, everybody sees the reenactments now. One's wearing gray, one's wearing blue. Well, that was never put in place until 2 years after because they found that a lot of the friendly fire was taking place because they didn't know who they were firing on because no one was wearing definitive uniforms.
That's interesting.
So the POWMIA agency is still today dedicated to trying to find those soldiers that are either MIA or KIA that weren't allowed to come home.
Right. And I think you found a really interesting story.
Yeah, it was published May 23rd of this year by CBS News. There was identified a remains of a World War II soldier who had vanished in 1944. And they have finally identified him, and he is an actual World War II tank crew member from the state of Tennessee.
Wow.
And he was killed when his M4 Sherman tank was hit by an an 88 mm round during the battle near Gay, Germany. Or Guy, Germany. It's spelled G-E-Y. I don't know.
G-E-Y.
Guy.
Yeah, it probably would be Guy. Yeah.
Guy. Yeah, because they have the heaviness in December of 1944. So the Defense POWMIA Accounting Agency, that's the one I was telling you about that are dedicated, they had put the news release that scientists had used anthropological analysis, DNA analysis, and circumstantial evidence to determine that those remains that were exhumed from Ardennes American Cemetery in Belgium were those of the 23-year-old Joe A. Vineyard. And they finally brought him home and entombed him in Maryville, Tennessee.
That's it.
So
just very surreal and so wonderful for the family.
Exactly. And with the forensics that we have now, the DNA, because that's one of the things we have always talked about. You know, it goes along with our science degree that we talk about with Edgar. There is still people out there still searching to memorialize and to bring those soldiers home.
Yes.
And I've seen many of TV series that have used this type of thing in their shows to show that, you know, it's been 50 years since Vietnam.
Yeah.
And they're still searching.
Yeah.
And they're working with the Vietnamese government that if they find any bones or any kind of artifacts, they allow America to come in and do research to figure out who it is and bring them home.
Exactly. And so, that's, yeah.
And to me, that is just as much as important as those that put the flags on the tombstones.
Yes.
Because even those who don't officially have tombstones, they're never forgotten.
Exactly.
And that's one of the main things that I wanted to reiterate about coming from Edgar Allan Poe, him being as popular as he is, that he did have his service. He may have not fought in a war, but he did give us service in the military.
Exactly.
And it has, it's one of our main bouts of history.
Exactly. And we just felt like this was a neat way to do what the topic for our episode for May.
Exactly. We definitely need to remember those.
Yes.
Those that have helped, those that, and I hope one day we do a little episode on wax, because a lot of people don't realize that women were pilots.
Right.
And very good pilots.
Yes.
And they were the ones that delivered all of those jets and those planes, B-17s, to all the soldiers overseas.
Right.
No one knows that.
Yes. And so, Jeannie,
yes.
You need to find that connection.
Exactly. And I'm going to.
I know you will.
We gotta put that in there somehow.
I have a small idea, but we'll keep that secret for now.
That's for next season.
Yes.
We got to keep something in the works.
Yes. And so we appreciate everyone listening and supporting. We have our Patreons. We have everyone that, listens each week, each month. Right. I think this season we've put out much more content than last year, and we're still going because season 2 won't end until July this year.
Right, because we figured that, hey, the best thing is just to keep on rolling.
Yes, absolutely. And so we thank everyone for supporting us in every way, and also coming to our events that we're present at. We're going to be at the Rotten Revival June 3rd, which is coming up
this Saturday.
Yes.
This Saturday, it's at Capitol Theater in Lebanon, Tennessee.
Yes.
So if you happen to be in the neighborhood, drop by and check us out.
Yes, from 1 to 7. And it's a neat historical building as well. So it's kind of cool to come in and see the building.
Yeah, there's a lot of history on that too.
Yes, absolutely. And so definitely check us out. We're now on Amazon Music. So we have one more area you can listen to us.
Yes. And we want to definitely thank all the military personnel.
Yes.
And, for any of their sacrifice.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you. And on that note, we are
Poe out.
Over 3 lilies there that wave and weep above a nameless grave. They wave from out their fragrant tops. Eternal dews come down in drops. They weep from off their delicate stems. Perennial tears descend in gems.